it is saying haggard. But presumably you have all of your photos on a flash drive or already on your computer. So typically we are not going to create new, we are going to open. And in this case, it has already opened to my Photoshop Restoration 2021 folder on the desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and open our first image. When you open the image, you'll see that the interface of Photoshop changes a little. So we have this work area in the middle where the photo actually appears. Up top, we have the menu bar. So you'll see file, edit. You're probably familiar with those menus if you use Microsoft products, but it also has different submenus like image, layer, and we'll get into a few of those later on. Underneath the menu bar is the options bar. And this options bar is going to change depending on the tool that we have selected. From the toolbar, you can see I'm changing them right now, and the options bar is changing with me. You can expand the toolbar if you'd like to have a little bit more space, or you can keep it a long skinny line. On the right side, we have some panels and some libraries. I'm going to minimize our libraries because I don't think they're necessary for what we're going to be doing. But the panels are very important. You can see we have some colors and some other little tabs here that we can switch to change some options. We have properties and adjustments. And finally, we have layers down here at the bottom. And we'll be using our layers panel a lot. You'll see me referring to it. So now that we've talked a little bit about Photoshop, I want to talk about old photos and scanning the photos. You'll notice that this image is essentially black and white. It doesn't have a lot of color to it, but even if you're scanning black and white photos, it is best to scan in full color. So you'll see there is this red little stamp in the bottom right corner. And that stamp is red. We'll see in a bit why that's important to scan in full color, even if your photos are black and white. When you're scanning, you always want to make sure that the scanning bed is clear of dirt and fingerprints, because you don't want those fingerprints to be scanned in the final image. And in the scanner settings, you want to make sure that you're scanning at least 300 DPI or more. Sometimes scanners will refer to DPI and sometimes they will refer to PPI. DPI is dots per inch and PPI is pixels per inch. So this photo was originally just 2 inches across, but I did scan it at 600 DPI. So it looks quite bigger on the screen. And the higher DPI or PPI you're scanning at, the higher your resolution will be, and the closer you'll be able to zoom into the photo. Down here, you can see that I am zoomed in at 66.67%. If I hold down the control key and use, if I hold down the control key, the alt key, and use the scroll wheel on my mouse, I can zoom in even further. Or of course, I could just manually type that in. But you'll see when we get zoomed in really close, all of these little squares, those are the pixels that make up the image that has been scanned. And there's going to be 600 of these little squares, these pixels per inch. So we are going to zoom out and get started. So the first thing that I want to talk about with our photo restoration is stains, or in this case, this stamp. A lot of old photos will have some staining. They might have some sun fading in these weird little random spots. They might have stamps on them. And by scanning them in full color, it's actually really, really easy to manually adjust the conversion to black and white and get rid of those stains pretty quickly. Now, removing stains in color photos can be a bit more complicated, but for black and white photos, it's fairly easy. what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to go to our adjustments panel here in the middle on the right. And then we are going to add an adjustment layer. So we can see there's different kinds of adjustments that we can make, but for this one, we are going to hover over this square that's half black, half white, and that's going to create a new black and white adjustment layer. When I click it, you'll see the image changed immediately to black and white. And we still see our little stamp and we still see our little sunspots. But the great thing about black and white is that you can adjust the ranges of colors and how dark or how light they are. So I know that that stamp was red, so I'm going to want to adjust my reds. And you'll see if I move it to the right, that stamp gets a lot clearer. You can see the letters more clearly in the stamp. But if I move it over to the right, you'll see that stamp almost starts disappearing. Now you can adjust these sliders as you want. You can adjust them almost all the way so that that stamp appears white, but I'm going to adjust the reds just about so. Now you can still see the ghost imprint of that stamp, but I think you'll agree that it's much better than when we started. So you'll also see that there's this stain up top, and I know that that was a bit of a brownish stain. And typically stains are a little bit more brown in color. For brown stains, brown is usually a kind of darker orange color, and that color is going to depend on every stain that you have. But if we wanted to get rid of this stain at the top, we would probably need to adjust the yellows as well. And because that stain isn't necessarily part of our main image, it's just really part of the background, I'm not too concerned about that stain. So I'm just going to leave it as is. We can easily essentially kind of erase that stain. So on a lot of older black and white photos, you'll see that there's also this kind of texture that comes with the paper. A lot of the older photos were printed on textured papers, and it's a little trickier to get rid of that texture, but we can accomplish it fairly easily by scanning our image twice. So I'm going to go ahead and do File, Open, and I'm going to open my first photo. So you'll see when I zoom in using my Alt key and my scroll wheel on my mouse, that each bump got a little bit of a highlight on it. But if you look really closely, you'll see that the shadow is on the bottom of the bump, and there's a bit of a highlight on the top of the bump. So that shadow has a direction. If we scan the image twice, once when it's right side up, and then again when we rotate it 180 degrees, that shadow, instead of being on the bottom of the bump, is going to be at the top of the bump. And we can combine these to kind of get rid of the texture a little bit. So I've already scanned my images, and what I'm going to do, you'll see when I clicked File, Open, I have photo texture A and photo texture B. So that photo texture B was just me rotating the image 180 degrees in my scanner and letting the light hit it a little differently. So photo texture B is already right side up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to not open it in a new window, because you can see we still have our original window here, the stains. Now I'm going to do File, and I'm going to do Place Embedded. And that's going to place a copy of the photo texture inside Photoshop, inside this document. And it's going to add it as a separate, it's going to look like a separate layer in the Layers panel, but it's actually going to add it as a smart object. So you can see here, on my background, the layer in the layers panel doesn't have an icon in the bottom right corner, but here it has this little icon. And that's Photoshop telling me that it is a smart object. We are, if I toggle the visibility by clicking this eye icon, you can see that the images are not completely perfectly aligned. And of course, we could manually move this layer little bit by little bit and try to get it just perfectly so. But Photoshop is a lot better at this automatically than we are. So what we are going to do is we are going to turn this smart object into a layer. And we are going to do that by right-clicking on the layer, the smart object rather. And in the middle of the pop-up menu that shows up, you'll see this option to rasterize layer. And we are going to do that. And now that little icon in the bottom right corner went away. I am going to select both of these layers by holding down the Shift key on my keyboard. And you'll see that both of them have now been highlighted into this lighter gray to show me that they are both selected. And I am going to go to my File menu. No, I'm going to go to my Edit menu. I'm sorry about that. We are going to auto align layers. Photoshop is really, really great at this. We're just going to go with the auto projection, and you'll see that the image changed a little bit. Photoshop seems to have rotated our layer just a bit because it wasn't perfectly 180 degrees. It was probably 179 degrees. But if I click off the layer, you'll see hopefully a little bit more of what I was talking about. When we scan the photos, the placement is perfect, right? This woman's face is perfectly in line with the other woman's face. But you'll see that the photo texture changes slightly, and the creases, these creases and scratches change a little bit as well. Because of the direction in which we scanned them. So now that everything is perfectly aligned, you'll see in the layers panel that there's this little normal drop-down menu. And when we click it, there's going to be a bunch of different options that show up. And I just happened to hover over the one that I wanted to select, but I do want to select darken as opposed to normal. Normal, you can still see those blue dots. If you select some of the others, you'll see the picture change as well. Color burn, she starts looking like she's from a 1930s horror movie. But darken is the one that I want. Darken is usually what I find works best on the photo texture. You'll see that the photo texture is minimized. Now we still have a little bit of that dot grid, that paper texture grid. So we're going to get rid of that in just a bit, but I think we can agree that already this is a drastic improvement. So now that we have these layers set to darken, what I want to do is I want to select both layers again. So I just did that by holding down the Shift key and clicking on the second layer so that they're both highlighted gray. And I'm going to right click on them. And this time we can merge layers, because the next thing that I want to do to them only works if they are considered one layer. By merging layers, it doesn't look like anything has changed visibly, but you'll see we only have the one layer in our layers panel again. So now that that's done, we are going to go to Filter, and we are going to go to Camera Raw Filter. This opens up a new window that's welcoming us to Camera Raw. We're just going to get started. In the Edit menu, you'll see that there are some basic color corrections that you can do. So these are really great if you have color photos and you want to increase the contrast or make the highlights a little bit more visible. What we are doing is we are not doing anything basic though. We are going into detail. And you'll see this noise reduction slider. I am going to get closer, about 100%, and I'm going to slide this noise reduction over. Now, you'll see, I think that the woman's skin is getting a lot smoother. We can still see a little bit of texture in the background, but we can also see that it's almost starting to blur away some details, right? The wisps of her hair aren't as clearly captured, but we're still seeing some details in the crocheted sweater. It's up to you. Photo restoration is not so much a science as it is an art. And what effect you're going for is definitely going to be different from the effect that anybody else is going for. But if we slide over the noise reduction to 100%, I think that's a little bit too smooth for me personally, but if 100% is what you're looking for, then definitely you can do that to completely get rid of that paper texture. I think that I liked it a little bit closer to maybe around 65. The photo texture is definitely still visible, but considering this was maybe just a 2-inch photo in the beginning, if we zoom out, I think that a lot of that texture is gone, and that's where I like it at personally. So after you're done using your slider in the noise reduction, you are going to click OK to commit to the changes that you made. And you'll see that the picture changed. Now, one thing that I haven't really talked about is our history panel in Photoshop. And if you ever want to see the progress that you've made, you can click on this little icon and it's going to show you your history. You'll see a lot of layer visibility changes, but I can just quickly go back to merge layers and then click on camera raw filter to see the instant difference that made. And I think that I like where that ended up. Are there any questions at this point?
None that I see so far.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. If at any time you want more explanation of the process, or if you want me to slow down, please let me know in the chat. Ellen will let me know as soon as possible. So we talked about stains and we talked about minimizing the photo texture, but a lot of photos, of course, also have these creases, or they might be a little scratched, or they might have little stains that we want to get rid of. We can fairly easily get rid of these. And scratches can be addressed in many different ways. So I think that the easiest tool in our arsenal is going to be the spot healing brush tool. And it's going to look like this. It looks like a Band-Aid with a little circle above it. And the one thing that you want to make sure, hang on. One thing that you want to make sure in your options bar is that you have content aware selected instead of create texture or proximity match. We want content aware. And typically we also want to sample all layers. So mode normal for this, but we can increase the size of our brush. So you typically don't want it to be too big. And typically with the spot healing brush tool, what I like to do is I like to move in small little lines. And whenever I see that the texture change or the color change dramatically, like from this gray to the kind of black of her hair to the pale gray of her skin, I'm going to end my stroke of the brush. So I'm going to click and drag. And you'll see Photoshop did a good job of kind of erasing that white crease. And I'm going to click and drag again here in the hair. And again, Photoshop just automatically, because we selected content aware, Photoshop has this artificial intelligence that kind of tells it how to cover those up. I'm going to zoom in using my Alt key and my scroll wheel on my mouse. And I'm going to carefully get rid of this little patch. If you do ever do kind of a long stroke like this, sometimes the results are fine, but you can see in this case, Photoshop kind of mimicked her eyebrow. So she has a second eyebrow, and I don't necessarily want that. So we can go to our history and undo that last stroke of the spot healing brush. And I'm just clicking and dragging. In some cases, just clicking, just in one small dot to get rid of these scratches. I hope that you can see.
Question.
Oh,
sorry,
wonderful.
Anna.
Yeah.
So would you ever use selection tool and content aware to limit the effect to a certain parts of the image?
I'm not sure that I 100% understood that question. Could you repeat it again?
Sure. Would you ever use section tool or selection tool
Yes.
and content aware to limit the effect to certain parts of the image?
So I think I see what you're saying. So when you use the selection tool, for those who don't know Photoshop, it kind of creates this area where you work in. And if you click off of that area, nothing happens. You can see normally when I click down, there's that little dark circle that shows up and nothing happens. However, within the selection area, when I click, there is something that happens. So I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, would I ever use the selection tool to kind of hone in on a specific area and then use the spot healing brush just within that area to make sure that the rest of the image stays unaltered? And yes, definitely I would. In this image, I don't necessarily see the need to. It's a fairly small image, but if there was like, say, a house or something, I would absolutely maybe use the selection tool on just the house and remove the creases on that house specifically before moving on to the rest of the photo. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I hope that answers it. I wasn't planning on going into selection tools just yet, but there are different tools that you can use to select different parts of the image in Photoshop. This is the Lasso tool. It works just kind of like a drawing tool. When I click down, it creates this line. So, and then you can see these marching ants along the border of the selection tool. If you ever select something, you'll want to make sure that you go to the select menu and then deselect so that you're working on the full image once again. I am going to undo a few of those changes because I was not a fan of how the spot healing brush affected her ear. There we go. Okay. So in that case, what I did was I just clicked a few times on her ear. And I think that that gave me a little bit more of a natural ear shape than clicking across and dragging it did. Other tools that you can use are the patch tool. So I'm going to scroll. I'm trying to find a good little spot for the patch tool. But let's say maybe the spot around her neck. Instead of using the spot healing brush tool, I'm going to use the patch tool, which you'll notice in the toolbar, there's little carrots, little arrows pointing down in a lot of the icons. And that indicates that there is a sub menu. So if you long click on one of the icons, you'll see the sub menu pop up. And a lot of the same type of tools are grouped together. So in this case, I want to use the patch tool. And for the patch tool, what I want to do is I want to kind of draw around the spot that I want to get rid of. And I'm going to move this patch over. And hopefully that did just fine. I'm going to layer deselect again. And that kind of got rid of that. So I'm going to try patching again. I do think that a lot of these changes that I'm going to show you with the patch tool could be used with the spot healing brush tool, but I want you to get as many tools under your belt as possible. So with the patch tool, we are going to kind of draw a little area around the offending mark, in this case, this crease in the photo. And I'm going to move, click and drag, move that spot over until I no longer see the offending mark. And then finally, I'm going to do layer deselect, and you'll see that that mark on her nose is gone now. Another tool that we can use to get rid of creases is the clone stamp tool. The clone stamp tool is a favorite of many. It's a little complicated to explain. If you just select the clone stamp tool and then click it, you'll see that there's a little error that pops up. We could not use the clone stamp because the area to clone has not been defined. And it's telling us to alt-click to define a source point. So the first thing that you want to do when you open up the clone stamp tool is you want to hold down the Alt key and you want to select a part of the photo that you think would be a good spot for Photoshop to start cloning. So I'm trying to get rid of, I hope that you can see it on your screen, this little crease right here. If I select just underneath it, I think that the skin tone is close enough that it would be a pretty good match. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just draw a line. You'll see that the crosshairs are moving, and that's indicating where Photoshop is cloning from. So if I move over, let's say, for example, I think that the clone stamp is a little hard to explain, but let's say for just the purpose of learning the clone stamp tool that I wanted to create a third eye on this image. I would select this woman's eye, and you'll see that the pupil has already been selected. And then wherever I want her third eye to be, maybe right underneath her original eye, I'm going to start clicking and dragging. And you'll see that the crosshairs move across her original eye as I am moving the mouse over, clicking and dragging. And essentially what I am doing is I am creating this third eye. So the clone stamp, what it does is I'm going to undo that third eye because I think that it's slightly unsettling. The clone stamp looks at your original image And it's basically copying pixel for pixel what's in that first original source point onto your new clicking point. So with the clone stamp tool, what I like to do a lot, I have my finger over the Alt key almost constantly. And I do a little click. I'm going to draw a little line. I'm going to do another click. I'm going to draw another line. I never want to get so confident with my source material, because typically you'll see the original source changes. Like in the case of the eye, it changed from this dark black to this white to this dark black. Right now, this patch of skin is pretty consistent, but a lot of times you're going to be working with something like leaves or something like a wooden texture. And you always want to make sure that your source point is what you're intending it to be, not something that has moved across the image. I hope that makes sense. Basically, with the clone stamp tool, you want to define your source point as many times as you can. So keep your finger over the Alt key, define the source point, and then click with the clone stamp. So I think we could definitely keep working on this image, but I do want to talk a little bit more about some more damaged photos and some other areas. So far we have talked about stains, minimizing photo texture, scratches and creases. Now we are going to talk about replacing missing information. So I'm going to do File, Open. And you can see this photo here. Now, a lot of times older photos will have the corners damaged, right? Either torn off, like in this corner, or maybe folded so many times that the other piece of paper just completely fell away. And we want to keep all of this wonderful information. We don't want to crop this image so that you know, the tallest point of this building, we want to see every single detail. And luckily, in a lot of cases, the corners are fairly simple backdrops. So we could definitely, if we wanted to, use the clone stamp tool, right? To kind of copy over the sky pixel by pixel. So I'm going to do this little part and then maybe kind of draw out a little bit of this. And we could definitely do that. However, I think that there is an easier way to do this. We are going to use our selection tool. So in this case, I'm going to use the Lasso Tool. And the Lasso Tool, I mentioned earlier, we use it to draw. And I'm going to draw as straight a line as I can. Whoops. And I am just trying to get pretty close to the edge of this photo, but hopefully not too close. By selecting this area, what we can do now is we can go to, I believe it's Edit, and there it is, Content Aware Fill. Photoshop, as I mentioned before, has a very good artificial intelligence to it. And by selecting Content Aware Fill, you can see kind of the preview of what it is trying to create in this panel that popped up. And it's not quite what I want, to be honest with you. I want this white to completely disappear. I want this beige color of the sky, the sepia tone color of the sky, to go all the way up to the edge of the image. So then we can crop it a little bit and get rid of maybe some of the detail on the edges, but then it will look more like a complete photo rather than a completely torn up photo. You'll see though in the main workspace area that our image now has a lot of green around it. And Photoshop has automatically decided what it thinks we want to replace this selected area with. And it's done a pretty good job. You'll notice that it did recognize that we probably want to keep it the same sepia tone color of the sky, and it's selected that in green. But it's also selected that border in white, where the scanning bed was open. So what I'm going to do, I have this brush that adds to the content aware selection, and I'm just clicking and dragging across the top edge so that that white border was erased from the green selection. And you'll see when I did that in our little preview of the photo, it did fix a lot of the issue that I was seeing. It's no longer that kind of fading into white. It's now just a full sepia tone color. You'll see in the options bar, we have this brush selected. We could, of course, make the brush size smaller. Right now we are subtracting from the selection, from the overlay area, rather. We were able to subtract that white from the green area. If we wanted to add it back in, we would add to overlay area. Or maybe, let's say that we wanted this area to be filled with trees. Maybe we would then add this little area to our overlay and maybe subtract more of the sepia colored sky. If we just wanted that content aware area to be filled with this tree texture. You'll see then Photoshop didn't have a big area to select from, but it tried to fill that area up as much as it could with this tree texture. So I hope that you can kind of see what Photoshop is doing with this green area. Again, we don't necessarily want that, so I'm going to completely erase all of the green on here. And I'm going to add back in that sepia sky. Okay. And once we're happy with our preview where it is, we can hit apply down here in the bottom to fulfill our content aware fill step. And then we can click OK, hopefully. And you'll see in another layer that has shown up, we still have our area selected. I'm going to deselect, but another layer showed up in our layers panel, background copy. And if we toggle the visibility, we'll see that that layer added just filled in the corner of the image. And from here, we could crop the image a little further. And we can do that by using the crop tool. And then just dragging the corners to where we want them. And in the options bar, we want to commit to this crop. So I'm going to hit the check mark. And now it looks like a much more complete photo than it was before. So, and we could, of course, repeat the content aware fill step for this little corner as well. So just to kind of reiterate the steps that we took to do that. we are going to do this little wonderful missing information. We used the lasso tool, and we're going to draw around by clicking and dragging, and we're not releasing our click until we get all the way to the edge, and we complete that complete circle, or this shape rather, around the missing area. We are going to go to Edit, Content Aware Fill. You can see Photoshop did a pretty good job selecting everything. I don't know that I would have selected all of this background information, but I do like what I'm seeing in the preview, where it continued that drape and the background seems fairly natural. So I'm going to click OK. And once again, that was created in a new layer. We can go deselect and we'll see that the image is complete again. Okay. I think just to kind of review, I'm not going to X out. Okay, we are going to open a new image. And we are going to apply all of these steps together. So in this case, this image was sepia toned, and I don't see any stains, but I do think that it will be easier to work with in black and white. Of course, we can adjust the colors, and you'll see how that kind of affects the whole image. Or we could just hit auto as well in our properties for the adjustment layer, and that creates this little adjustment. I am going to merge layers. So I shift clicked and selected both of them, and then right clicked on them, and I'm going to merge layers from the pop-up menu. We can use the patch tool, certainly, for certain areas, but I'm going to use the spot healing brush tool for a lot of this. I'm going to zoom in using the Alt key, and then I'm just going to swipe, making sure, of course, that I like the brush size and that I have content aware selected. And by swiping with the brush, it's not giving me quite what I want. But we can get rid of a lot of that. Luckily, this paper didn't have a photo texture, but if it did, we could definitely apply a filter to it to get rid of some of that noise. In some cases, I think that the spot healing brush is giving a little bit too much of a kind of line effect. It almost kind of looks like a worm to my eyes, right around the area where I covered the crease. You can, in the brush drop-down menu, you can decrease the hardness to make it a bit of a softer brush. So the brush will still have a hard circle outline when you click on it, but it's going to do a little bit more of a fade. In this case, I don't think that my spot healing brush tool is going to do the trick, so I'm going to zoom in as much as I can. It looks very pixelated, unfortunately, but I'm going to use probably the clone stamp tool. Ooh. We're going to use a much smaller clone stamp tool than we did on the previous photo. And I'm going to select the source and just kind of draw over that crease on his forehead. A little better. As you can see, there's a lot of give and take. You just have to be patient with your photos, honor the history that the photos give you, and really give time to bring them back to life. It's tempting to take shortcuts and just use the spot healing brush tool as much as you can, but you'll usually get much better results if you spend more time with the photo and let it come back to life on its own pace, in its own time, working step by step. I think that I messed up his hairline a little bit there. So in this case, I would probably want to readjust those clone stamps. But overall, I hope that that was a good little review. I hope that you learned some new photo restoration techniques. I did want to point your attention to some more library resources that we as the Plano Public Library have to offer. If you go to our website, planolibrary.org, you'll be redirected to this website. And if you hover over the library tab, you can go to Learn, Research and Learn. If you click on Research and Learn, you'll be taken to a lot of our databases. And for this one, we are going to be looking for LinkedIn Learning. And you can get there by clicking on Business and Career. And then clicking on this LinkedIn Learning box. LinkedIn Learning is a website where you can choose from thousands of online courses to learn in-demand skills from real-world industry experts. You're going to click the Get Started box and you're going to enter your library card number and your PIN. So once you are logged in, though, this is what the website will look like. And you'll see that up top, you can search for skills, subjects, or software. So in this case, I would want to look for photo restoration. And you'll see there are 12 course results. If you're interested in learning more techniques and fixing maybe color photos, anything, maybe you're having a lot of trouble with some scratches, you can, of course, go to LinkedIn Learning, look for the skills that you're looking for, and you can look at these courses. If you look for a specific course, so I'm just going to click on this one by Brian O'Neill Hughes, you'll see that a video pops up. Woo. And I paused the video, but naturally it plays. You'll see usually there are exercise files related to the course, so you can follow along with the instructor as they go through. And you can watch the various videos. You can click on a specific video if you want to see tricks to hide flaws and recover details. You can just watch that video immediately. You don't have to watch the whole course, but the contents give you kind of an overview. And these are wonderful instructors that can teach you much, much more. Ellen, is there anything that I'm missing?
No, and we do not have any questions at this time either.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us to an end of the class then. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you learned something new, and we hope to see you at the library so that either you can try Photoshop on our computers or maybe for your next great read. We're here for all of your needs and wants. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.